Love at First Sight. Chapter 2. Then, surprisingly, she began to hyperventilate loudly. She groaned convulsively and literally collapsed. It was as if her legs suddenly gave out. I picked her up and pulled her against me. She gave a rhythmic, shuddering cry. It amazed me. It was the hottest display of female beauty I'd ever witnessed. I held her tightly to my chest as she came back to me. She was looking at me with a concerned expression on her face. She said, puzzled and a little scared, "What did you just do to me?" I said quite sincerely, "Did I kiss you?" She replied, "Nothing like this has ever happened to me before." I said with complete conviction, "Obviously, so did I. That was our connection. I felt it too." She stood staring at me with huge eyes. She seemed hypnotized. She said, "I can't imagine what will happen to me when we spend time together in the bedroom." The goofy-looking Maddie lingered a moment longer, and then the energetic and witty Maddie returned. She clapped me on the arm and said with a laugh, "You've had enough. We have to get Billy." We spent the rest of the day at Seneca Lake with Tom, Nancy, and the 3 boys. It was idyllic. I kept waiting for her to turn back into who she really was, but she continued unconcernedly in her horribly unnatural guise as my favorite woman. Nancy and she spent the afternoon good-naturedly teasing both of us about our many male failings. Only a longtime wife and mistress could get away with that without damaging her feelings. But Maddie handled it like an experienced married woman. We seemed to be together all the years of Billy's life. And my neighbors were our old friends. The unobtrusive feigned closeness was a result of the affection Maddie radiated toward us. It was obvious that Nancy was puzzled. Nancy looked good, but she was out of Maddie's league and she knew it. She couldn't understand what such an attractive woman was doing to me. It wasn't such a strange question, since that's exactly what was going through my head. Tom's thoughts were a little more obvious. He looked longingly at Maddie as she motherly leaned over to talk to the children. He kept throwing looks at me that were more like, "I don't know how you did it, but you're a lucky dog." Maddie also gave Billy a sense of acceptance that helped him open up to everyone. I know that part of my attraction to her is that I am a ready-made family. Billy is a bright, albeit somewhat nerdy boy, and his serious arguments about the advantages of Triceratops over Stegosaurus were absolutely invaluable to the 4 adults. Maddie was glowing with love and pride. It was hard to believe that she had met him only the day before. Perhaps I first encountered her as the star of the movie cluster. And maybe I really don't know this woman. But one thing was certain. It was that Maddie loved Billy. We grilled steaks and drank beer on a warm spring evening. I honestly didn't know what the future held. There was a 50-50 chance that tomorrow she would come to her senses and realize how ordinary and boring my life was. And then she would run screaming back to her luxurious home and her fast-paced life. But I also know that a lot of my problems stem from thinking too much. What I knew for sure was that she gave me a sense of purpose that I had never experienced before. I realized for the first time that a good woman in your life makes you a much stronger and more capable man. She made me strive for success to justify the faith she put in me. I've decided. This one would probably break my heart. But I was going to do everything I could for her. I knew that deciding to marry this woman as soon as possible was either a very brave decision that Billy and I would benefit from for the rest of our lives, or it was either the stupidest, most selfish and naive idea that had ever crossed my mind. However, I also knew it was coming. Only time will tell. The little woman sleeping next to me is smart, funny, driven, and just plain stunning. She was a star. Perhaps you can see why I'm a little concerned. We bonded over the strangest weekend imaginable. She went from a minx on Friday to an extraordinary life partner by Sunday night. In those 48 hours, she made my little boy happier than he had ever been in his life. And she almost killed his daddy. Maddie is the most beautiful girl I've ever known. There are no boundaries or limits for her. She is always ready to tell you what she wants, often in urgent and very explicit terms. She is generous and yet completely consumed by her own hunger. Her body is magnificent. Her technique is honed. Her stamina is limitless. You don't have to say it. I know what her world-class beauty implies. I'm not that naive, and I certainly don't believe in unexplained luck. But unfortunately, you can't have both. Women like Maddie are a major paradox for guys. We want a super beautiful woman. And then we realize what all that hotness does to the rest of the male population, which in turn causes mild irritation to the one lucky enough to be her man. It's not that Maddie and I don't look good together. It's that it's like we met when I pulled her pigtails in 3rd grade. In fact, I met her 6 months ago, when she was having a masterful time with 5 very handsome yuppies. Truth be told, I'm an unremarkable nerd, especially when it comes to savvy. These guys were way outside my code on the coolness factor, yet in the 8 months we've been living together, I haven't had the slightest hint that Maddie wants to switch. She called it love at first sight. All I know is that the Monday after we met, she just showed up on my doorstep with all her stuff. She never came back. Now she was snuggled up to me with a look of complete satisfaction on her face. She said she wanted to live an unpretentious life. If that's true, I can see why she's with me. I'm the king of casual, but I wish I could believe her motives. She told me over and over that it was my complete lack of style that made her want to be with me. I wasn't flattered by her assessment, but I had to agree. I completely lacked personal cool. The only trump card I have up my sleeve is her love for her children. I know for a fact that her love for my child is genuine. No one could have behaved as consistently, with as much love as she has, and for as long as she has, without letting this cat out of the bag. She only thinks about what's best for Billy. She has made his life full and interesting. With Maddie's help, Billy has grown from a shy boy to a strong and confident 4-year-old. Needless to say, he idolizes her the way only a child can love his mother, which is more than ironic, since Billy doesn't know his real mother. She left us to marry some politician from Washington when he was 8 months old and never looked back. Needless to say, if Maddie moved in with us, we would have to merge our households. I owned my place outright, and Maddie seemed to have more money than she could spend. So we did a lot of planning to find the best long-term living arrangement. Neither Maddie nor I wanted to change Billy's life, at least not until he was used to her presence. Perhaps it was an unnecessary precaution. Billy would have been happy living in a yurt on the steppes of Outer Mongolia as long as Maddie was with him. We argued and went shopping. Billy went with us to all the real estate deals. He had full veto power. Maddie kept an eye on it. Eventually, we settled on a beautiful place in Georgetown. It was on the Palisades west of the university, and it was easy to get to everything nearby. I sold my condo. I bought it with cash during the recession and got a lot of money from the subsequent sale. So I had a very large down payment on a new home. I took full responsibility for the purchase. Maddie was so far above me socially that I wanted to show her that I could make some big boy moves myself. Maddie was renting her apartment to some pompous State Department dude. She said she was making a fortune in rent. Maybe being a high-ranking Harvard lawyer helped her negotiate. Commuting to work hasn't been a problem. I mostly work from home, and Maddie quit her job the day I moved in. She said she was just doing FDA because she had nothing better to do. Now that she had Billy to take her to all the cool, kid-friendly places in DC, she said that's what she really wanted to do. We went everywhere: museums, stores, and playgrounds. I had never seen a woman so realized. It was eerily unsettling. I've learned to live with the mystery that is Maddie, but I've never been able to solve it. Every time I try to get to the bottom of her motives, I am met with a "what kind of idiot are you?" attitude. It repulses me, as if the answer should be obvious. Maybe to her it is, but what's going on in that maze she calls her mind is definitely not clear to me. If she hadn't been so single-minded, I would have understood why she gave up everything to pursue motherhood as if it were a calling. But she walked away from a fast-paced legal career as if it had no value to her. With that, she probably set the cause of women lawyers back half a century. Highly accomplished women lawyers are supposed to aspire to kick ass and take charge, not carry children. I was listening when she told her boss she was quitting. Her boss was Charlie Schneider. I thought with horror, she did this to her boss? This led to an even more exciting thought. I wonder if any of the other 4 guys on that train were co-workers. That's the kind of thing you're better off not thinking about. Unless, of course, you want to keep your sanity. I heard, "Hi, Charlie, it's Maddie. No, it's okay. I made it home. No, seriously, there's no problem. Listen, I'm going to send you a digitally signed message about my termination as of today." "What? Don't scream. What's wrong with you?" "No, This has nothing to do with you and me or last weekend. I just want to take a different direction in my life. I don't care what it does to my legal career. You know I don't need the money. Seriously, you're being a jerk. If you try that, you'll find out how much better a lawyer I am than you." Then she slammed the receiver down and muttered to herself, "What's gotten into me?" We had been together for 2.5 months when she announced she was pregnant. Maddie's pregnancy was one of the most sublime and shocking experiences imaginable. First of all, she was happy, as no woman has a right to be happy. She was radiant. Every night, he and Billy would talk to his sister. By then, we knew it was going to be a girl. Billy would tell her about his day and then kiss her baby bump at night. Of course, since the countdown was still going from T-5 months, sister might have been a bit of an abstraction to Billy. But Maddie insisted that baby Chelsea, we'd already picked out her name, was the person Billy should get to know and love. That turned out to be very wise. Billy treated the upcoming birth as if he were getting a new puppy. I was shocked when she announced she was expecting a baby. One could be forgiven if I hadn't once asked a woman about birth control. If I had made the same mistake twice, I would have won a Guinness Award. Then I plucked up courage and asked her to marry me. She laughed at me. I said, "What? Don't you want her to have a father?" She replied, "That's not the point. It's just that the 19th century called and left you a message. They said you were no longer obliged to act honorably." I replied, "What if I want to marry you?" It seemed to bother her. She always radiates happiness. The disturbance in the force was obvious. My little voice turned away, threw up its hands and said, "I knew it." She said, "I love you with all my heart and we have the perfect life together. I don't want anything to change that. So, yes, I am afraid to marry you. I'm afraid we'll go the way of all married couples, and I don't want that. I want things to always be fresh and open between us." It was such a formulaic response that I had to throw out the bullshit checkbox. I said with more bitterness in my voice than I intended, "Are you sure your hesitation isn't due to the fact that you're waiting for a better offer?" Her eyes flashed. She asked, "What the hell do you mean?" I said, "What I just said. I know you can switch with me with one phone call. Is that the reason you don't want to marry me?" She said with cold anger in her voice, "This is ridiculous. For the first time in my life, at least since I left home for Harvard, I am unequivocally content. I'm happy living with you and having your children, but I don't want the way we are together to ever change. I've been around men my whole life, and honestly, things start to fall apart when we start talking about commitment. I know what you're thinking, and yes, I can get any man, and no, you're not Mr. Perfect, but neither am I. I will be 30 years old this February, and at the time I met you, I was sick to death of the politics between man and woman. No man has ever treated me with as much respect as you have. Their only goal is to use me or use me to advance their own careers. You, on the other hand, treat me like a confidant and best friend. You give me true happiness and are the perfect father. Where we are on the social ladder is completely irrelevant to me. I've proven to myself that I can succeed in a man's world, and I might want to go back someday, just to keep my head up. But I've never wanted anything more than a family and a happy home. That's what I'm going to get with you." Another cliché, and my little voice wondered, does this woman really exist? Keeping that special bond I have with you and Billy is my highest priority. When I'm around you, I feel on top of my game. I'm accepted for who I am, and I'm content with that kind of life. I'd be crazy to want to change anything about my current situation. However, if you promise me that the easy friendship we have now will never fade, I will marry you in a heartbeat. But I have one condition. We must always trust each other. If you can't do that, I want to end the loss right here and now. I've invested too much in what we have, and I can't bear the thought that it was all just my personal fantasy. I didn't think about any of what she had just said. As usual, my male ego has blinded me. You tend to forget that a woman as beautiful as Maddie has as many human frailties as you do, and that she has her own fears and insecurities. The thing is, I didn't know anything about her life before I met her, and it had never occurred to me that a woman as stunningly attractive as Maddie could suffer from insecurity. Of course, only someone as simple-minded as me could fail to see that Maddie was facing her own problems. She's such a strong, independent soul that I couldn't imagine how anything bad could have happened to her in the past. In her case, I can always invoke the male exception. We are not the most sensitive creatures. Dogs are, men are not. In that moment, a lot of things fell into place. I said, I can learn to live with the fact that every man turns his head when you walk into a room. I can learn to live with all the hidden longing you cause in our species. I think I can also learn to live with the fact that you are above me on the social ladder, but I can't stop asking myself, why me? Why do I deserve such a wonderful woman? I know I'm insecure. Any guy would be confident with a woman like you. You have to be realistic. In a man's world, you're a trophy, a prize. If I were a rich and famous movie star, I'd understand why you're with me. But since I'm not, I carry a lot of insecurity about our long-term prospects. I know insecurity is a sign of weakness, but I never claimed to be a cowboy. I even understand that you are attracted to me for the simple and fulfilling life I offer, but I'm afraid that someone cooler and higher up will steal you away from me. Won't there come a time when you'll want the same old excitement? Booze, endless parties, new men? She looked at me like I was crazy. For the first time, I saw real concern in her eyes. She looked almost frightened. From the moment I'd met her, she'd treated me as if there were some self-evident things in our relationship that I just hadn't realized yet. It was as if she saw something I didn't. Now she was looking at me as if she had made a mistake, and there was really nothing there. I didn't understand her strange reaction. To allay her fears, I said, I know what you're thinking. And yes, I feel the same deep connection between us. I just wanted to say that I just don't know why. She looked at me with relief, laughed and said, You think too much. Someday you'll realize it. Then I met her family. This event made me pay attention to many things. She was born and raised in a small Michigan town and wanted her wedding to take place there. It didn't matter to me where we got married. I would have married her in the middle of the Sahara Desert. So the next week, Billy, Maddie and I flew to the Detroit airport, rented a car, and drove 25 miles to her parents' house in Ann Arbor. The wedding was supposed to be a civil wedding, but we still had to wait 3 days after receiving the license. Maddie has several useful images besides loving mother, excellent companion, and the world's most beautiful ass. One of them is a tough Harvard-educated lawyer. She's the reason we got our license. Her mom was a professor at the University of Michigan, which is located there. Her father held a high position in the scientific community. Her 2 sisters still lived in their house, which was as close to the castle as any place I had ever been. It was on a ridge overlooking the Huron River, and its grounds were not just lawns, but actual grounds. I scratched my head in amazement, wondering if Robin Hood and his merry band of men were lurking in the vast forest. She told me to stop gawking. It was embarrassing. I should have known she had roots like that. My dad owns a hardware store, and my mom raised the kids. I was frightened, to say the least. Her household simply enveloped her with love. The pervasive atmosphere of happy and peaceful domesticity filled in many gaps and answered most questions about why she held such family values. In that moment, she changed again, from a confident woman to an older daughter. In many ways, the actions associated with this role were the same ones she played with me, loving and obedient. But her parents made her possessive. Their interrogations did not include water torture, but it was clear that they were following an alternative scenario. In their scenario, Maddie went through several levels of achievement in the legal field until she became a judge and then a member of the Supreme Court. Now she stood in front of them and said she wanted to change the course of events. She actually wanted to live with me and raise the kids. This was an interesting reversal from my blue-collar universe. In my world, a common plot in relationships with daughters is the desire for marriage and children. But these were high-ranking WASPs, both with doctoral degrees. Naturally, their attitude toward the idea expressed contempt. I could see that Maddie's parents were so opposed to her marriage that our appearance on their doorstep almost resulted in Billy and me being banished. The fact that their daughter was visibly pregnant, and I was the sole culprit, only made it worse. Needless to say, they were not happy. I had to wave my red cape in front of the bull. We exchanged the usual pleasantries. Then she and her parents and I sat down to lunch to talk turkey. That we were served lunch by caterers or servants or whoever did not go unnoticed to me. Her father said with genuine, contrived joy, "So how did you and Maddie meet?" An honest answer to that question would have ended the conversation right there on the spot, and probably would have gotten my future wife sent to a convent because of it. Instead, I said, "We met at a party in Falls Church. Afterward, I gave her a ride home. The people she came with abandoned her." I left the reason for leaving to their imagination, confident that they would never come up with an actual reason. I added, "We bonded over the weekend. She gets on really well with my son, and it felt so right." Both parents looked like they didn't believe a word of it. Their demeanor suggested that our encounter involved a white van, drugs, and a bag over their heads, and that Maddie couldn't get her phone out fast enough to stop the kidnapping. The problem is that this explanation seemed much more plausible to me. Her mother said, continuing her contrived sociability, "So what do you do? Whoever won Maddie's heart should be a star in the Washington skyline." I said, "I'm a freelance pen tester. I hack into people's computers and tell them how I did it." I realized that in their opinion, I had just declared that I was a borderline criminal. I was starting to get a little tired of all these judgments. Her father said with more gruffness in his voice than perhaps he intended, "Doesn't sound like a career. Where did you learn how to do that?" Truth be told, no responsible school would teach what I know. So instead, I casually said, "Oh, I didn't go to college." That's because even before I reached drinking age, I was earning over 6 figures a year. But Mr. and Mrs. Bigshot PhD didn't need to know that. I also didn't bother to tell him that I was on speed dial with most of the heads of major corporations and knew the top cyber guys at the agency and on the farm. That would have made it too easy for them. Maddie looked at me like she wanted to take me outside and beat the shit out of me for acting like an ass with her parents. She knew exactly what I was up to and why. It seemed to me that they didn't show her the respect she deserved. She was an intelligent and balanced woman who made a choice about what she wanted in life. Her parents should have honored her. It was her I loved, not them. I was surprised to find myself using the word love in my imagination. She would probably end up breaking my heart, but she was the only person besides Billy I'd ever let into the house. At this point, the interrogation was interrupted. Her mother said brightly, as if she was about to lose her temper, "When is Maddie going to give birth?" Maddie gave her the enigmatic smile last seen on the Sistine Madonna and said, "Little Chelsea will become part of our lives in early September. We can't wait for her to join us. I want to have 4 more." I thought her mother would faint at the sensation. Maddie made this statement nonchalantly, as if discussing sightseeing plans. Perhaps Maddie was a little tired of her parents' attitude too. They withdrew. A furious conversation and several raised voices were heard in the house. About half an hour later, Maddie's younger sister Millie appeared on the terrace. Millie is short for Millicent. Maddie's full name is Matilda. This led me to believe that Maddie's parents either have an exquisite sense of humor or are the most pretentious people on the planet. We both looked at her expectantly. Millie is like a younger, slimmer, and slightly taller version of Maddie, just as smart. She said this with some irritation in her voice. "They want to throw a party tomorrow night in honor of your marriage." "I don't understand. I told them you could do it after the wedding, but they insist on doing it before." I get it, in case Millie didn't. They hoped to illustrate to Maddie all the things she would give up if they did disown her. We both smiled at Millie and said with fake enthusiasm, "That sounds wonderful." Maddie is a very smart woman. She figured it out too. Millie grinned and said, "The guests of honor are ordered to report tomorrow night at 7:30 sharp. Why don't you two take one of the cars, and Maddie will show you around town. I'd like to keep Billy if you don't mind. He's so cute, and Mary and I want to play with him." Mary was the next youngest after Millie. Her real name was Mirabelle, but no one called her that. All 3 girls in this family loved children equally, and Billy had already accepted them as aunts. They wanted to take him to the pony farm, north of this place. We spent a perfect day and a half exploring the neighborhoods of Ann Arbor. I knew about the university, of course, but there were a million enjoyable experiences in such an expensive city. I was particularly interested in the area around the farmers' market. I wondered what happened to the hippies of the 1960s. It was interesting to see that now they all drive Mercedes as men. We were at her castle, getting ready for the party, at 6:30 the next day. I hesitate to call Maddie's family home. Her parents were very upset when Maddie insisted that all three of us sleep in the same room. I'd be ready to sleep alone in my bedroom and Billy on the floor in a sleeping bag. It was our usual way of traveling. The problem arose when Maddie insisted on sleeping with us. This caused some old-fashioned resentment. Apparently, in this house, unmarried people didn't sleep in the same room. It made me wonder if they had really already made the connection between me and her potbelly. Maddie was already dressing Billy. He was dressed in something more stylish than the Kennedy offspring. Downstairs, he was playing croquet with Millie and Mary. Maddie paced around the room in her bra and thong, trying to decide which classic little black dress to wear. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in the flesh. And when I was young, I used to hang out on the beaches of South Florida. There isn't an ounce of fat on her 5 feet 2 inches, but her wide hips make it seem like she's more massive than she really is. It's only when you see her without a single stitch that you realize what a perfect hourglass figure she has. Her body is absolutely taut. The muscles beneath the silky smooth skin are toned and don't look exhausted. But her real glory is her legs. She's been a lifelong dancer, and her legs are nothing like the typical skinny female legs. They are fully muscular and perfectly developed, and her calf muscles stand out like little cannonballs when she wears regular heels. She was wearing the same thigh-length black stockings she'd worn the night I'd met her. Of course, that and a pair of patent leather shoes were all she was wearing during that meeting. And those gorgeous legs were straddled by several guys. Half naked, Maddie was too much, so I grabbed her and kissed her. She opened up to me the way she had since our first kiss. When we kiss, she's completely immersed in another world with me. She burns a little hotter than most mortals. We may be talking fractions of a degree, but when you kiss her, she is literally red hot. The same can be said for the other end of her. She pressed herself against me. I guided her back to the bed as she started to tear at my belt. She broke the kiss when the backs of her legs hit the bed. She turned suddenly, put both hands on the mattress, and lifted her ass. She whispered furiously, "Do it." When she's in that mood, she's hard to say no to. So I adjusted my bayonets and even muttered, "Charge," under my breath. It's as amazing as kissing. She must have been thinking about me the last couple days. She let out a muffled growl and pushed back hard. Then she hissed, "I'm almost done," and thrust her hips hard, and I left her shaking face forward on the bed. Needless to say, I must have changed the atmospheric pressure in it. She was lying so that I was on her back like a rag. She was panting as if she'd run a record-breaking 100 meters. We were like that for a minute. Then she turned under me. She threw me an almost panicked look and said, "Promise me that this will never change, that you will always be mine, and I will always be yours, that nothing will ever happen between us." She hesitated and said even more emphatically, "Promise me." It was as if she had a premonition of things to come. Hello, viewer. I could cut the story short here and say that the full version is on Patreon, but I'm not an asshole to do that to you, so I'll just remind you that many scenes of a vulgar nature have been cut or censored, and you can always find them on our Patreon. Thank you to those who have already joined us, and now continuing our narrative. I grinned and said, "That's the easiest promise I've ever made. You are my perfect woman, and I will do anything to keep you in my life." Funny how life changes for the better in a few short hours. I remembered that promise with bitter anger a little later in the evening. I got dressed before Maddie did. She's been working on my closet since we've been together. Now I look much more like a resident of Harvard Yard than a resident of Laytonsville, Maryland. However, medical fact states that it can be dangerous to the male's health if he hangs around while the female prepares for presentation. So I went to the party. Her sisters grabbed me and took me to where Billy was. Millie is still young enough to have all the cool kid games on her computer, and that's where Billy was before Millie put him to bed in our room. But I was allowed to see him before Millie took him upstairs. Billy is Maddie's pride and joy. She treated him like her own son from the moment she saw him. Her sisters had adopted him overnight, and they were in no mood to put up with silly arguments about who was really his parent. That speaks to Maddie's feminine sensibilities. And in the last 6 months, she spent a lot of money on his social development. As a result, he went from a hurt, almost frightened boy in public. He has changed from a wounded, almost frightened boy into a child who is very sociable and at ease among people. He was earnestly talking about dinosaurs to a small group of amused adults. His face lit up when he saw me, and he ran over to give me a hug. I kissed his cheek and asked, "How's the pony?" He said, "Daddy, they were fascinating." I thought, what 4-year-old uses the word fascinating to describe his day? Then Maddie appeared on the steps. She was breathtaking. She was wearing one of those traditional cashmere little black dresses with a simple string of pearls. But that classic oval face and that spectacular body made her look like Cinderella at the ball. Her huge, intelligent hazel eyes were framed by her beautiful russet hair, like a curtain on the stage of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She has amazingly clear, swarthy skin, which she showed off by exposing her shoulders and going down to the deep neckline of her dress. She lifted the girls to stun, and they swayed delightfully as she walked. But the main attraction was the magnificent, muscular legs of the dancers in their black dresses. The whole room froze and watched her serenely and gracefully descend on her 4-inch heels. She glowed with a special blend of happiness and beauty. I was proud of her. She was mine and no one else's. As soon as she saw me, she immediately declared her love for me. Her face lit up, and she walked toward me, keeping her eyes on me. She took my hand and pressed it against her magnificent breasts. She said to me, as if she were dressing just for me, "Do you like it, my love?" I looked at her in awe and said softly, "I like it." Her parents instantly destroyed that special moment. They swooped down on us like a pair of hungry vultures. Then they dragged us around the room to introduce us to each of Maddie's friends. During this tour, they made it clear that they were introducing me to her real peers. I realized what they were getting at. None of these people were even remotely like me. The herd of pretty princesses and college Joes was endless. They were polite to the peasantry. Nobility required them to be polite. Some even seemed friendly. They had one thing in common: excellent genes and good upbringing. They also had money and status. Maddie's old friend, who turned out to be the least friendly, was a Tom Cruise look-alike named Chad. My little voice said wryly, "Seriously, Chad?" He was shorter than me in height, but much heavier. I got the impression that he had been training hard. He was dressed in traditional preppy clothes: blue blazer, white cotton shirt, rep tie, and khaki pants, sneakers, and no socks. He had that easy swagger and assumed superiority that distinguished their kind. His perfect white teeth gleamed as he shook my hand. He made it clear that he thought Maddie was crazy. Both parents did not fail to inform me that Maddie and Chad were a couple throughout prep school. They also hinted that Maddie had handed him her cherry. They told me that they graduated from Harvard together. Maddie went to law school and Chip went to Harvard Business School. He lived in Omaha like no other place. This was because he was a rising star in a small firm called Berkshire Hathaway. I realized that Chad's unfriendliness was mostly due to the fact that he had unrequited love for Maddie. This conclusion was drawn from the fact that he met her with such a combination of melancholy, lostness, boredom, and lust that I wanted to throw up. Maddie reacted to it about the same way you would react if a 12-foot diamondback rattlesnake jumped out in front of you. She gasped, and I could see the genuine fright in her eyes. Her dramatic reaction was puzzled, to say the least. I haven't had a chance to think about it further. All because it was at this point that her father, like a professional, took me out of the herd. It was as if he wanted to create some kind of space for two old lovers to indulge in memories. He wrapped me in a hug and said, "How about trying a real Cuban Bills?" Then he dragged me into the wood-paneled library where I looked around, trying to see if Ulysses Grant and J.P. Morgan were going to join us for an after-dinner cigar. There were 4 other older men in the room, all drinking Johnny Walker Blue at $500 a bottle. Her father handed me a real Cohiba and 3 fingers. I get it. He was having the obligatory man-to-man conversation with his new son-in-law. I had to admit it was all very interesting, and the cigar and whiskey were priceless. I sat there for hours, fending off questions about what I do for a living. The old guys were a driving force in the defense community, and friends of Maddie's dad. Most were from NASA, but there was one DISA administrator who fell into the realm of my special little universe. So I hinted to him that I was much more than Maddie's father had imagined. The expression of intelligent understanding in his eyes was gratifying. I had a feeling he would bring Pops up to speed as soon as I left the room. The party was still going on when I got back to her. Maddie was on the dance floor, caught in Chad's predatory embrace. It was a real surprise. I got the impression that she feared and hated him at the same time. What had changed in the 2 hours her father had held me captive? I'm the kind of guy who absolutely will not stand by while someone else is having an affair with his woman. So I walked straight across the floor and cut in. Chad looked pissed. Maddie looked pissed. I thought, what the fuck? One night might not hurt the baby, but I gather she didn't want to drink at all during her pregnancy? Maddie looked at me dumbfounded. As if not recognizing me, giggled and said, "I'm drunk." I said with some irritation in my voice, "I can see that. How did that happen?" For a second, she looked puzzled. Then she said, "I don't know. Maybe I only had one glass?" Then she hiccuped, added embarrassed, "I remember that," and giggled some more. At this point, one of Maddie's friends cut in on her, and I found myself dancing with someone else. It seemed like it was all choreographed. I was taken away quickly. Chad approached Maddie again. He pulled her into an embrace that could only be described as intimate, both arms around her, both palms on her ass. She had her head down on his shoulder and looked completely out of it. I was disgusted. The song is over. The next song started. I went back in there to interrupt it all again. But instead, I found another preppy princess standing eagerly in front of me. I was sure that the reason for the interest of all these well-meaning women was not my destructive charm. It was like an underhanded game, organized on Maddie's behalf. My new partner took me dancing to the far end of the room. At that moment, I lost sight of Maddie. The new girl was so blue-blooded that I wondered if she had come in a carriage with a foursome. As she and I danced, she told me about the insanely passionate affair Maddie and Mr. Chad had when they were in college. Apparently, everyone in their group just assumed they would get married when they graduated high school. But Maddie caught Mr. Chad serial cheating. Then, to make matters worse, he came over to her house one night, just to talk, and ended up using her. Her friend added, "At least that's what she claimed. Of course, it was her word against Chad's, so we didn't know who to believe. We talked her out of filing a police report. If she had done that to Chad, it would have really hurt his career." I thought, some friend. The song ended, and I went in search of Maddie again. This time there were no stray aristocrats interfering with my search. It was a little unsettling. Maybe I'd lost all my charm. Maybe something else was going on. I looked all around the dance floor, but Maddie wasn't there. There were yuppies of all shapes and sizes. But I also didn't see that freak Chad. I smelled a well-groomed 200-pound rat. There were about 10 million rooms in her house, and if I didn't go from room to room on every floor, I'd have no luck finding them. I was getting seriously worried. Maddie was too drunk to be alone. Then I ran into Mary. She's bigger and taller than Maddie. She also has probably the biggest bust in the history of the Ann Arbor community. If Maddie is the Rocky Mountains, Mary is the Himalayas. They were squeezed into her little black dress. I said, "Have you seen Maddie?" She said, "The last time I saw her, she was walking outside with Chad." And she pointed toward the patio doors. I thanked her and went out to the patio. It was summer warm outside and very dark as soon as you got away from the light of the house lights. I saw a few people standing on the lawn and went in their direction, but I didn't recognize any of them. I noticed movement in the small ornamental gazebo to my left, toward the river. I hesitantly wandered in that direction. I honestly thought, maybe they're out there admiring the river in the moonlight. I know I'm stupid, but the alternative was too painful to contemplate. A well-maintained path led through the trees. It was paved with cedar shavings. No one could hear me approaching. However, I didn't really need to be silent. I could have climbed the elephant while playing the trombone. The two occupants of this small building would never have noticed me. Hello, dear viewers. So, let's dive into an intriguing turn of events. But first, let me remind you that the full uncensored version of this story is already posted on our Patreon. The link is in the description. Meanwhile, as our protagonist searches for Maddie in a dark, mysterious gazebo, there is a sense of foreboding in the air. What could be going on between Maddie and Chad in this secluded spot? Will this unexpected reunion with an old flame lead to unforeseen consequences? But before we uncover the secrets lurking in the shadows, let's reflect on the complex dynamics of what's going on. Maddie and Chad's past, college love, and the unspoken tension that arises when they meet again all add new layers to the narrative. As our protagonist navigates the luxurious world of Maddie's high society family, we witness a clash of biographies and expectations. Now back to the gazebo. The atmosphere is filled with anticipation. The protagonist, driven by anxiety and perhaps jealousy, approaches it. What will he discover inside? Will it shatter the idyllic image of Maddie's perfect life? Or will it strengthen the strength of their bond? But wait, viewers, the story doesn't end there. The night is just beginning, and the twists and turns are yet to come. Join us in the next chapter where secrets will be revealed, alliances will be tested, and characters will be pushed to their limits. And remember, our Patreon is waiting for you to get the uncensored version and exclusive content. Thank you for being with us on this exciting journey. Subscribe, like, share, and stay tuned for the next installments. In the meantime, keep yourselves in suspense.